I never thought a single glance through a bathroom window would change my life. But it did. It changed everything. I was rinsing shampoo from my hair, eyes closed, when I felt it. That strange sensation of being watched. My heart skipped, then raced. I turned slowly, soap still clinging to my skin, and there he was, our new neighbor, standing still, eyes locked on mine through the sheer glass. He didn't look away, and neither did I. I should have screamed. I should have been horrified. But I wasn't. Instead, my breath hitched in my throat, and something deep inside me, something I'd buried, stirred. I didn't cover myself. I didn't move. I just stood there, completely exposed, letting him see me, really see me, in a way my husband hadn't in years. That moment, it was the beginning of the end. Or maybe, the beginning of something I never dared to want. My name is Alana. I'm 31 years old, and I've been married to my husband, Jeremy, for 6 years. On paper, our life is the kind people envy. We own a modest home in a quiet, sun-warmed neighborhood just outside Atlanta. Jeremy has a stable job in finance, the kind that keeps the lights on, the mortgage paid, and the fridge full. He's kind, dependable, the kind of man who makes sure the oil in my car is changed and leaves the last slice of pizza for me. But he doesn't see me anymore. Not really. It started slowly, like most things do. A night where he fell asleep, before I came to bed. A kiss that landed more on the cheek than the lips. The slow erosion of conversations once charged with curiosity, now replaced with routine questions about groceries and weekend chores. Sex became scheduled, predictable, if it happened at all. There was no passion in his touch anymore, only habit. I can't remember the last time I felt truly desired. And that's what I miss. Not just sex. I miss being wanted, craved, looked at like I'm more than a checklist of domestic accomplishments. I'm still a woman. I have hunger in my bones, in my skin, in the way I bite my lip, and hope, just hope, that maybe tonight he'll notice me. But Jeremy doesn't. And I stopped asking for it. He's not a bad man. He doesn't yell. He doesn't cheat. He remembers birthdays and texts me when he'll be late. But there's a difference between being loved and feeling alive. And somewhere along the way, I began to fade into the background of my own life. I tried to talk to him once. I told him I felt distant, disconnected. He blinked at me with that tired, confused look and said, "We're just busy, babe. Life gets like that." Then he turned on the TV. That was the moment I realized he thought everything was fine. That, this slow, colorless decline, was enough for him. But it wasn't enough for me. There were nights I'd lie awake beside him, watching the ceiling, my thighs pressed together, my mind filled with fantasies I didn't dare speak aloud. Not about other men, not yet, but about being touched like I mattered, about being seen deeply, unapologetically. I was starving, not for love, but for electricity, for that pulse of danger, of want, of surrender. And I didn't know it yet, but someone was about to give it to me. His name was Marcus. He moved in 2 houses down from us one rainy Saturday afternoon, and I noticed him right away. Tall, broad shoulders under a soaked gray t-shirt, skin the color of warm espresso, and eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 stories. I was carrying a basket of laundry when I saw him through our front window, hoisting a heavy box from the back of a moving truck, muscles flexing with effort and grace. He paused, looked up, and caught me staring. I flushed, ducked my head, and quickly turned away, pretending to fidget with the laundry. But I felt something then, a flicker. A spark I hadn't felt in a very long time. Jeremy met him the next day when he brought over a 6-pack as a welcome to the neighborhood gesture. They talked in the driveway while I watered the garden. Jeremy waved me over to say hi, and that's when Marcus turned to me with a slow, deliberate smile. "Nice to meet you, Alana," he said, his voice deep, smooth, and warm like aged bourbon. He looked me directly in the eyes, longer than most strangers would. "You've got a beautiful home." "Thank you," I managed, my voice suddenly a size too small in my throat. "Welcome to the neighborhood." That was all, just words. But something lingered in the air between us, invisible but undeniable. After that, I began to see him everywhere. Morning jogs shirtless, glistening with sweat. Evening walks with his dog, passing just as I stepped outside to water the lawn. He'd nod, sometimes smile, always that same slow-burning gaze. And I started finding reasons to linger outside a little longer. One afternoon, I was trimming the roses in my front yard when he walked over, shirt clinging to his chest from a workout. "Need help?" he asked, and before I could answer, he was beside me, reaching for a thorny branch. We talked. Nothing inappropriate, just casual neighborly chatter, jobs, the neighborhood, his recent move from DC. But his voice had this pull, this magnetic undertone that made me lean in, laugh, too long, touch his arm once without thinking. That night, I lay in bed thinking about his laugh, the way he'd watched my mouth when I spoke. I pressed my thighs together, flushed and frustrated. Jeremy lay beside me snoring softly, and I hated myself for the heat I felt. Over the next few weeks, our casual encounters grew. He'd wave as I pulled into the driveway. I'd catch him shirtless in his garage, fixing something with his hands slick with grease. One day, I brought him some of the banana bread I'd made, and he invited me inside. His home was masculine, earthy, wood, leather, and deep colors. A guitar leaned in the corner, and the scent of sandalwood clung to the air. I sat on the couch, feeling out of place and overly aware of how my dress clung to my thighs. "You always smell like vanilla," he said suddenly, pouring us both a glass of wine. "I like that." My breath caught. "Do I?" He nodded, handed me the glass, his fingers brushing mine. We didn't touch, not really. But that moment, his fingertips grazing my skin, it jolted something awake in me, something ravenous. The next time we spoke, it was after dark. I was taking out the trash when I saw him on his porch, a glass of something dark in his hand. "Couldn't sleep either?" he called softly. I walked over, arms crossed over my chest to hide the thinness of my tank top. We stood there in the hush of night, the streetlights casting amber shadows. "I see you sometimes," he said, voice low. "In your window." My heart stopped. "You always look so peaceful, but lonely." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because he was right. He took a slow sip of his drink, eyes still on mine. "If I were your man," he said, voice like gravel and silk, "I wouldn't let you feel like that." I should have walked away. I should have told him to stop. But instead I stayed. My heart thundered, my body a live wire. After that, I avoided him for days. I needed space, clarity. I focused on Jeremy, made his favorite dinner, even initiated sex. It was sweet, predictable. I faked the sounds he liked. He fell asleep with a hand on my hip. And all I could think about was Marcus's mouth, his voice, the way he looked at me like I was something edible. Then came the day everything changed. I had just finished showering, wrapped in nothing but a towel, steam still thick in the room. I walked past the bathroom window, which I always left slightly cracked for ventilation, and I saw him, standing outside, looking in. Our eyes met. I didn't move. He didn't either. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a fleeting glance. It was a moment suspended in silence and heat. And that was when I knew. This wasn't just temptation anymore. It was inevitable. It happened on a Thursday. Jeremy was at a client dinner, the kind that ran late and ended with a tipsy text, "Don't wait up. Love you." I stared at those words for a long time. Love you. 3 syllables, so familiar they no longer tasted like anything. I took a long bath. I lit candles I hadn't touched in months. Vanilla, lavender, jasmine, scents that reminded me I was still a woman, still a body, still alive. I shaved slowly, touched myself gently, not for pleasure, but for preparation. And I hated that I knew what I was preparing for. Or maybe I loved. I was brushing my hair in front of the mirror when the doorbell rang. I froze, brush mid-stroke. My heart answered before my feet did. I wrapped myself in a robe, thin and silk, and padded barefoot to the door. Marcus stood there, hands in his pockets, shirt clinging to his chest from the warm Georgia night. His eyes swept over me, neck to toes, and settled on my face like a question. "You left your kitchen light on," he said softly. It was a lie, and we both knew it. I didn't answer. I stepped aside. He walked in without hesitation. The door clicked shut behind him like a secret being kept. For a moment, neither of us moved. The air between us buzzed, heavy with everything we'd never said aloud. "I shouldn't be here," he said finally. "You are." That was all it took. He stepped forward slow and sure, like he was giving me time to change my mind. I didn't. I couldn't. My hands found his chest first, warm, solid, alive. He exhaled sharply when I touched him, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. Then his mouth was on mine. Not gentle, not hesitant. Hungry. His hands slid up my sides, thumbs brushing just under the swell of my breasts, making me gasp against his lips. I felt like I was burning from the inside out, skin buzzing, knees weak. He tasted like bourbon and something wilder. His tongue moved with purpose, claiming me in a way that made me moan low in my throat. My robe fell open. His eyes dropped, and for a moment he just looked at me like I was art, like I was something sacred. His fingertips grazed my collarbone, my stomach, the dip of my hip. Every inch he touched felt discovered. "You're shaking," he whispered. "I know." He bent his head and kissed my neck, slow and deliberate. My head fell back, hands clutching his arms. I could feel his heartbeat through his shirt, feel how hard he was already. The way his body responded to mine made me feel powerful, desired, real. He lifted me, effortlessly, and carried me to the couch. The robe slipped away completely, and I was bare beneath him, laid out like an offering. He knelt between my legs, kissed the inside of my knee, then higher and higher, until my breath hitched and my fingers tangled in his hair. He took his time. He worshipped me with his mouth, soft, slow strokes that built into something uncontrollable. I arched, cried out, lost myself. It had been so long since I'd felt that way, completely undone, completely known. When he slid inside me, I nearly wept. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't, because it felt like relief. Like all the tension I'd been carrying, all the ache I'd buried beneath polite smiles and quiet dinners, was finally being released. He moved slowly at first, watching my face, listening to the sounds I made. His hands framed my face, his thumbs brushing tears I didn't know had fallen. I wrapped my legs around him, pulled him deeper, needing more, needing everything. My nails raked his back. My hips met his thrust for thrust. I felt him everywhere, inside, around, beneath my skin. I cried his name like a prayer, like a curse, like a confession. And when I came, it wasn't just a climax. It was a breaking open. It was every silent night, every unsaid word, every longing I'd swallowed and smiled through. It was freedom. He followed, burying his face in my neck as he groaned into me, his body shuddering in release. For a moment, we just lay there, skin to skin, chests heaving. "I've wanted that since the first time I saw you," he murmured into my collarbone. "I know," I whispered. Silence stretched between us, thick with what we'd just done. That's when the guilt started. Not sharp, not immediate, but soft and creeping, like the tide. Jeremy's face flashed in my mind, his hand on my back last night, warm and unaware. The breakfast he made me this morning, the way he kissed my forehead out of habit. I rolled away slowly, clutching the robe to my chest. Marcus watched me, expression unreadable. "I should go," I said. "Do you want to?" I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. What I did know was that I felt more in 1 hour with Marcus than I had in years with my husband. Not because Jeremy was bad, but because he'd stopped seeing me. And Marcus, He looked at me like I mattered. Like I was wild and wanted, and something worth breaking the rules for. He touched me like he was starved for me, and I realized I had been starving too. I dressed in silence. He kissed me once more, slower this time, like a promise. Then, I walked him to the door, fingers still tingling, thighs still trembling. The house felt different after he left. The walls breathed heavier. The couch still smelled like him. Wood, sweat, sin. I stood in the dark, wrapped in my robe, and tried to pretend I could rewind time. But I couldn't. I had crossed a line. No turning back. And what scared me more than anything was the truth bubbling up beneath my guilt. I didn't regret it. Not even a little. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen making coffee like I hadn't just committed adultery on the living room couch 12 hours earlier. The robe I wore still had the faintest trace of Marcus's scent. My skin still held the ghost of his touch. And yet, I stood there pouring cream into Jeremy's mug like nothing had changed, like I hadn't changed. He walked in yawning, rubbing his eyes, dressed in the same navy t-shirt he always wore to bed. He smiled when he saw me and kissed the top of my head. "Morning, babe. You sleep okay?" I forced a smile. "Yeah, you?" "Dinner ran long. Sorry I got in so late." "It's okay." He took a sip, leaned against the counter, completely unaware that I'd been shaking under another man's body while he was clinking wine glasses across town. That I had whispered someone else's name with my lips parted and back arched while the man I married was probably laughing at a client's joke. I watched him drink his coffee and felt nothing. Not hatred, not even guilt, just numbness. Like, my body had absorbed so much heat the night before, it had no energy left to feel anything else. When we made love 2 nights later, if you could even call it that, I lay beneath Jeremy and went through the motions. His hands were gentle, his kisses soft. He whispered my name once, and I smiled like it meant something. But all I could think about was the way Marcus had gripped my hips like he was drowning in me. The sound of his breath when he came inside. Me, rough and raw and real. Jeremy didn't notice I wasn't there with him. He never did. When he rolled over and fell asleep, I stared at the ceiling, my body untouched by what had just happened. That's when the guilt began to bloom, not because I had betrayed Jeremy, but because I hadn't even missed him in Marcus's arms. Shouldn't that mean something? Shouldn't I be broken with remorse, torn apart by shame? But instead, I felt clear, like fog had lifted, like my body had finally remembered it belonged to me. Still, I tried. I cleaned the house obsessively, cooked Jeremy's favorite meals, wore the perfume he liked. I smiled when he told his long-winded work stories and laughed at the shows we watched together, hoping if I performed hard enough, the guilt would go away. That if I could be a perfect wife, maybe the lie I was living would feel less sharp. But every time I closed my eyes, it was Marcus I saw. The way he looked at me like I was something rare. The way he listened when I spoke. Not just with his ears, but his whole body. The way he touched me without hesitation, without fear, as if I were something he had craved for years. Jeremy never made me feel like that. Maybe he used to, a long time ago, but routine had worn down every sharp edge of our marriage. It wasn't his fault entirely, but it wasn't mine either. I wasn't looking for an affair. I wasn't prowling for attention. I was just lonely, starved. And Marcus? He fed me. But that didn't mean the guilt didn't whisper. Every time Jeremy kissed me goodnight, I felt a ripple of shame under my skin. Every time I answered his texts with heart emojis, I remembered the raw sound of my own moans against another man's mouth. I started to question everything. Was I a bad person, or just a woman who finally remembered she was alive? Was this affair the death of something, or the beginning? And what scared me most was how easy it had been. How quickly I'd stepped out of my marriage and into someone else's hands. As if I'd just been waiting for an excuse. A moment. A door. Marcus didn't break me. He just walked through the one I'd already left open. One night, while Jeremy slept beside me, I pulled out my journal, the one I hadn't touched in months, and wrote one sentence. I don't know who I am anymore. But maybe that wasn't true. Maybe, for the first time, I did know. And maybe that was the problem. I didn't see Marcus for a week. Not because I didn't want to, but because I had to see who I was without him again. I needed to know if it was just the rush, the novelty, the ache of loneliness being filled, or something deeper. The silence between us didn't feel like a closed door. It felt like a held breath. Jeremy went on with life as usual. He kissed me in the mornings, texted me about groceries, laid his head on my lap while we watched TV. And I stared at him sometimes like he was a stranger I used to love. Or maybe a man I'd never truly known. One night, after dinner, he told me he'd booked a weekend getaway for us, said we needed it, that we'd been off lately and he missed me. I smiled and nodded. I told him that sounded perfect. And then I walked into the bathroom, locked the door, and cried until I felt hollow. Because I didn't miss him. I missed being missed. That weekend, we went to the mountains. A cozy cabin, wine, soft jazz. He tried. I could see it. I even let him make love to me. I tried to feel something, anything. But it was like trying to warm my hands on a fire that had already gone out. When we got back, there was a note tucked in my mailbox. I haven't stopped thinking about you. Come to me when you're ready. No name, no address, just that. I read it 3 times, heart pounding, legs weak. Then I tucked it in the drawer beside my bed, right next to my wedding ring, which I hadn't worn in days. That night, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself the way Marcus once had. Bare, honest, woman. And I realized something. I had spent so many years being a wife, a role, a shape that fit beside a man who stopped seeing me, that I had forgotten how to see myself. So what did I do? Did I leave Jeremy? Did I run back to Marcus? I did neither. I moved into a short-term rental. I told Jeremy I needed space, not because of Marcus, but because of me. Because I couldn't. Remember what it felt like to want my own life instead of just surviving someone else's. He cried. I cried. And then I left. I haven't called Marcus. Not yet. But some nights I lie in bed, the note clutched in my hand, and I wonder if I will. And maybe I will, or maybe I won't. But for the first time in years, the decision is mine. I am not whole. I am not healed. But I am awake.